each state, the spirit is the same. So let's just say that we can have a typical state law when we talk here, and we're not going to take on a lot of water with, oh, in our state we do it this way. Oh, we have this, we have that. Okay. So talking about that law, there's maybe a lot more stratification in the enforcement of the law. Not the spirit of the law, just to get the job done, the task ahead, but the enforcement if people don't play by the rules. And I sit on an advisory committee for the Illinois Commerce Commission. There's 5 of us. And we hear cases when either the utility owner or the excavator make it known that they're not happy with staff's findings of a willful violation. People don't get a violation, life moves on. But you get a violation, and in Illinois it's termed a willful violation of state law, and you don't like that staff, you don't like the basis in which they made that decision. You can appeal it to an advisory board, and we listen to it, and we can either agree with staff, we can agree with whoever's appealing it, or somewhere in the middle, make some sort of happy middle ground result. But what I've seen in the last couple of years isn't anything like what I saw when I began in 2011. And late tickets have been at the core of this. And I don't know from state to state what enforcement penalties are. I know some, I just hear in casual conversation and whatnot. But in Illinois, there's been 5 point something million handed out this year, and also about that same amount collected. All right. Now, is that big money for a big utility? It's not big money, but this used not to happen. Okay, at least in Illinois, because we're given history of where it started at and where it is today. This is the most it's ever been, and you can see that it's created some awkward situations, I suppose, in some circles. But the thing that I find fascinating is that it's still a complaint-driven system. All right? Yeah. If somebody doesn't complain, then nothing is investigated. There's no exchange of information. So imagine if you had an enforcement agency, which I don't think anybody has, but imagine an imaginary state with an imaginary enforcement agency with a staff of 25 people, all trained in the state law, and we're sent out into the field to find potential willful violations. That'd be pretty amazing, right? What would happen then? And would it make our old system better? Would people conform who aren't conforming today? The argument, I remember 2004, 2005, the argument was enforcement. But in our meetings today, we sometimes just have conversations like, doesn't matter what the fine is, things aren't going to, what are we going to fix by, whether it's $1,000 fine, $100,000 fine? Is that money going to change anything? And quite a few people say, no, it's not going to change anything. But your thoughts? And we're talking regulation here, enforcement.
Right. So first thing I would say is, in most of the rest of our lives, like when you buy something from Amazon, or when you buy a service, someone to install something on your property, the word enforcement almost never comes into play, right? Because if you buy something from Amazon or a store or a service from someone and they don't perform, you could do a few things. You could withhold payment. You could dispute the payment with the credit card company. You can, whatever. You could do a whole myriad of things. Why? Because you're the customer. So we talk about enforcement in this space a lot because there's no line of sight between the customer. You mentioned money. Yeah. Between the customer of, let's say, the information, where the facilities are underground. There's no line of sight from that entity, from that stakeholder, to the stakeholder that's providing that service, right? So let's just say the stakeholder is providing a service as a contract locator, because most of the locates are done by contract locators. And so it's a contract locator providing that service, and they're paid by the facility owners. And the recipient of that service is, let's call it the contractor. And who are they the customer of in this ecosystem? The answer is nobody.
Right.
Because you're not the customer of someone or something that you pay nothing to. So we talk about enforcement a lot here because there's no line of sight between the customer and the service provider. And that's something that should be looked at, because when there is line of sight, enforcement and all these things are usually not in play, because I'm the customer. I don't like what you did, and you're going to make it right. The second thing is, you're right. Let's say $5 million in Illinois. In the U.S., there's probably $2 billion spent on providing damage prevention.
Good.
Okay. $2 billion. Illinois is, let's call it just 5% of that. Okay. Right. So $100 million a year. So $5 million fine in a $100 million ecosystem. It's not insignificant, but it's 5%. Okay. And 5%, and if I increase resources, that $100 million spend by, let's say, 5% to $105 million, will all of the fines go away? No way. Right. There is not a single person in Illinois who will, if you make this challenge, you said, I will increase your damage prevention budget by 5%, and you will dramatically improve performance so that your fines go to zero or your damages go to zero. There isn't a single person who will take that bet. Right. So what I'm saying is, if you increase spend by 5%, that those fines will not go down commensurately. Right. So why does that still go on? Because it's probably the most efficient thing for the stakeholders to do. Right. 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 And I think, can the fines be big enough so that it will catch their attention more? Yeah, potentially. I mean, let's say you increase by 5 times. So now it's 25%, $25 million a year in a $100 million ecosystem. Yeah, that could catch their attention, but I think you're gonna get so much pushback from that, not just from the contractors and the contract locators, but the people who pay the contract locators, the utilities and telcos, big telcos, that's not going to be amenable to them.